Hello, everybody. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Welcome to today's episode of Fireside Chat. So it's just me today, which is a great start to my first Twitch stream alone. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Anisha Made, and I'm here from the Developer Evangelist team at Amazon. So today's episode, we've got a really exciting topic. We're going to be talking about optimizing your web apps for Fire Tablet. So I hope you guys are excited as I am, because this is quite an interesting topic for me. I came from a web developer background as well. So I think, for me, optimizing web apps is a huge part of my past. And I'm really excited to share tips for you on how you can use this on your Fire tablets. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into a few of the things that we always talk about at the beginning of Twitch. So a couple of rules. Be respectful in the chat, use respectful language. We want to make sure we're creating an environment where everybody feels comfortable to ask questions. So go ahead and ask them in the chat if you have any. Don't forget to engage. So again, it's just me today, so please make sure you ask questions. You can also tweet using the hashtag that we have. Let me show that on screen. Give me 1 second. So if you use hashtag Fireside Chat on Twitter, on LinkedIn, we can make sure that we retweet. You can share your ideas, questions. You can retweet the stream. So engage with us using hashtag Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. So I'm here usually with Mario every Tuesday at 6 o'clock GMT. That's 10 a.m. PST. So yes, let's start with today's topic. So as I said, we've got a really cool topic, which is optimizing web apps. So today, that's what I'm going to be talking about. How can you optimize your web apps for Fire tablets? So you can develop HTML5 web apps to run on Fire tablets. And when you do this, you have several ways of structuring your web apps for the Amazon App Store. So when you submit your app to the developer console, when you log in as a developer on Amazon developer console, you can do so in 3 ways. So the first one is as a packaged app. So this is a full-fledged client-side web standards-based application where your assets would be bundled together in a zip folder ready for distribution. So this is what maybe the old way of web developing used to be like. So you bundle up your application and you put it on a client-side web application for distribution. The second is what most people are familiar with. So this is a hosted application. So this is where the application's assets are hosted on a web server, and clients can connect to the host and download the app's assets to their device before they can run the application. And finally, we have HTML5 hybrid apps. These are platform-native apps that use web content for the user interface. So there's a couple of different ways, and you've probably seen some really new examples of web apps. I don't know if any of you have played Wordle, but this is a great example of when people would use a web app on a Fire tablet. So you can choose to add that web app to your home screen. So when you click on it, you're taken to where the web app is hosted on its server, but you can interact with it like you would with any other app. So any of you haven't played Wordle, I'd definitely recommend it. Great game. But this is a great example of web apps that we see today. So what are the advantages of each kind? So for packaged apps, you don't require you to find a hosting solution for your app. So this is one of the main benefits of it. The performance can be better because all of the assets are present on the local file system. And it works better offline because everything's packaged together and available. Hosted web apps, so these can be complete applications with either server-side or client-side code. So server-side code is when the application is bundled on the server side, and client-side is when it runs on your user's computer or tablet in this case. So the benefit, another one of this, is they can be updated immediately. So customers will always be able to get the latest code. Like you don't have to have them download an updated package. And they provide almost the same experience to most of your customers as on your website. And then we have hybrid apps. So these applications are faster, they're more efficient at rendering, they're better at script performance and memory management. And they support most of the latest web standards of HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. And they have hardware acceleration, GPU optimizations for CSS, maybe Canvas, and web GL graphics. So as you can see, there's different advantages to all three kinds. And I think what's best when developing your web app for tablet is to figure out what works best for you, which of these three would make most sense for your application. So how do we get started with developing our web application? So the first step would be to get our dev environment set up. So how do we do this? So the first step to do would be to include the Amazon API JavaScript library. So if your web app makes use of Amazon APIs such as the in-app purchasing API, you have to include this JavaScript library in your code in order to use those APIs. So for hosted apps, the first thing you would do is include it in the JavaScript file, which is a hosted URL. And you can do this by adding this script tag to the end of your HTML body to include this file within your web app. For packaged apps, we create a new packaged app, which is as simple as creating any other type of zip file. You make sure the app has an index.html file as its starting page, or indicate the path to the app's main launch page when submitting the app. To ensure the app works offline, you include all the assets as well. So you can use a GUI application like WinZip or using zip from the command line to do this. A packaged HTML5 app project looks and works like a normal web project folder on a server. So for packaged apps, the Amazon API JavaScript file is automatically injected at the root level of your zip file. So use a relative URL in the script tag to refer to this file. For example, if your app's files are at the top level of the zip archive, then you need to put your script as shown on screen. And if your apps are inside a zip folder, then make sure that the file is at the same level as the My App folder. So I'm going to pause really quickly. Again, guys, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to remove that banner, sorry. But yes, please make sure you let me know if you have any questions or if you'd like me to go over anything again. So how do you use the Amazon API JavaScript library? So this is also very simple. So all you really have to do is add this within your app. So any code in your web app that uses the Amazon API must be called after you add the Amazon Platform Ready event that is raised from the Amazon HTML5 framework. So once you've added this to your application, all your API code goes within this function, and that should mean that your web app is ready to go. So once you've done this, you need to specify the launch path. So how will the Fire tablet know how to launch your application? So for the hosted one, the launch path of your app is the path to the file that should be loaded when your app first starts. So for hosted apps, the launch path is the URL of the web app. So when you submit your hosted app to the Amazon App Store, you will specify which URL of the page should be loaded when the app starts. However, for packaged apps, this is slightly different. So for packaged apps, the launch path is the HTML file that should be loaded when your app first starts. And this is relevant to the root of the zip archive. So for example, if you want to launch index.html when your app first starts, and that file is at the root level of your zip archive, you will need to use /index.html. And if the file is in a subdirectory called myapp/, the launch path would be /myapp/index.html, if that makes sense. So when you submit your app to the Amazon App Store, specify this URL as the launch URL. So that's how you can set up your dev environment and how you can get your app within the Amazon App Store and launch your application. So what are best practices that we recommend for developing your web application? So I'm sure many of you are familiar with, best practices for web apps for desktop. But what about best practices for web apps that are going to be used on tablets? So the first one would be to secure your app is using HTTPS. So communication on the internet is susceptible to eavesdropping and malicious tampering. And Amazon App Store, we recommend that you take action to protect your web apps when you submit them. And the best thing you can do is secure your web apps using HTTPS. So, in addition to recommending the use of SSL for all apps, Amazon also requires that web pages that use the in-app purchasing require authentication to be hosted over SSL. And this is to prevent any fraudulent in-app transactions, which is why we require that your pages use the Amazon in-app purchasing API to be completely secure before this happens. So, to ensure that your app is secure, make sure that the page triggering the in app purchasing transaction and all its associated resources are served using SSL or HTTPS. And this will prevent any man in the middle attacks that can be used to attack your application while it's interacting with the Amazon in app purchasing API. Additionally, if you're using any customer permissions and are therefore required to host your app pages over SSL, we recommend that all those linked resources are also hosted over SSL. So prior to submitting an application that uses in-app purchasing, ensure that any third-party components used by the page triggering the in-app purchasing transactions are also served securely. Check that the common components like ad networks that can sometimes create an iframe that is not served securely, thereby causing the Amazon in-app purchasing API to fail, throwing an exception are handled. And additionally, social media controls can also inadvertently serve non-secure content, which would in turn restrict access to the Amazon in-app purchasing API. So we have done a whole section and a Twitch session, and we have lots of YouTube videos on how to integrate with Amazon in-app purchasing API. So when you do this, just keep in mind all these points when implementing this in your web app. So the next thing is to plan for changes in device orientation. I'm going to pause here because I think we might have a question. Sorry. Oh, no. So here we go. Sorry. Back to, if you do have any questions though throughout, make sure you do post them in the chat and I'll try and get to them during the session as well. So as I said, so your customers may use your app with either portrait or landscape mode. And these are a couple of tips for managing your app's behavior in these different orientations. So the first thing to do would be to, So to lock in the orientation in portrait or landscape mode. So the spectrum of screen sizes, resolutions is widening every day. And we did do a whole session on how to ensure that you account for different screen sizes and resolution when designing your apps for tablets. And for this reason, creating a version of your web app that targets each individual device is not a practical way forward. And this goes to the same way with your Android applications. So instead, we use responsive web design techniques to provide that optimal viewing experience with a minimum of resizing, panning, and scrolling across those ranges of devices. And most web frameworks these days are very, they have responsiveness at the forefront of them. But how would you create that web application that ensures that you are accounting for the responsiveness? So you can also lock in the orientation in portrait or landscape mode. So native apps such as games are often designed to run in only one optimal orientation. And when the user rotates the device, the app stays locked in its original orientation. And there are many ways that you can force this orientation in a certain direction. I won't go into much detail, but there's APIs you can use. You can like some custom code to do this. But if you need to ensure that your app has to be locked into a certain orientation, make sure you include this. And next, when you do this, or when you lock in an orientation mode, you can also instruct customers to rotate their device. So if your app does run best in a certain orientation, but you don't want to lock in the orientation, you can tell customers with either words or prompts to rotate their device to the orientation that works best for your application. So the third thing that I would recommend is to turn off touch feedback. So within your apps, when you click on a button, there usually is some highlighting. However, when we click buttons when they're using your web app, we don't want this highlighting to come up. So by default, most Android devices provide that visual feedback when they tap the web links. And this is that translucent color block overlaying the target of the link. So if we want to disable this, we just need to include this piece of code in our CSS. So I can post this piece of code in the chat as well, or you can look at our tech docs, which I'll post at the end of the session to get this piece of code. So these are a couple of tips for generic, keeping your UI lightweight and responsive. So I'm sure some of you might be familiar with frameworks, but these are tips if you're using packaged applications and you're just using, say, JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So the first thing is use responsive typography. So you can design your app to fill the entire screen, taking into consideration that devices have different screen sizes and aspect ratios, sorry. And in certain cases, it may not be possible for your app to fill the entire screen. So the app may need to be letterboxed, or the native aspect ratio may not match that of the target device. And in this case scenarios, your app must fill at least 80% of the screen. You can also use things like the Media Query API or Bootstrap to ensure that your CSS is responsive. You can use image optimization and content delivery networks. So with content delivery networks, if you're planning to provide lots of videos, images, audio files, or other types of media, you can use a CDN, and this is highly recommended. So some of the most common CDNs are like Amazon S3 bucket, which we obviously recommend that you use. And the advantages of using CDN are very many. So the first one would be that your download speed would be improved. So you can leverage the CDN resources that enable you to distribute the load, save on bandwidth, and boost performance. And the better CDNs often offer higher availability, lower network latency, and lower packet loss. But what the main point of the CDN is to provide like a globally distributed selection of data centers that enable your downloads to occur from the closest server. Finally, what I would say, the last thing to make sure you do is minify your files. So ensure that this is to ensure that your web app loads quickly and performs optimally on all platforms. So keeping the code lightweight and compact, but also making sure that you can character minify your code, therefore minimizing load time, would optimize your performance and speed up your app overall. So last but not least would be to add in-app. Sorry, this is not last but not least, but one of another tips is to add the IAP API for web apps. So we've spoken loads about the IAP API, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Again, you can have a look back at our stream, which was solely focused on how to implement the in-app purchasing API. I also have 2 YouTube videos on our channel, which we will share the link to at the end. But the main thing about this is to make sure that you use the IAP API for web apps. So again, it follows a similar process as in implementing this within your Android application, where the first step is to register the purchase handlers with the Amazon Services Library. Then you call the IAP API methods at appropriate points within your application, and finally respond to the callback methods. So one of the next things that I recommend you do is use user agent strings for Fire tablets. So an app or a web page can read the user agent string to detect that the device is a Fire tablet, and thus provide a specific user experience for that specific Fire tablet. So user agent strings may include the version of the host operating system, the version of the browser, and other information. And this table shown on screen shows the user agent strings for Fire tablets. Just a couple of Fire tablets. Amazon Silk is the web browser available for customers to use on Fire tablets and Fire TVs and Echo Show devices. So this is the available information to you. So you would have the Android version, product model, amongst other things like Chrome version, WebKit version. And this allows you to really make your web app compatible for very specific parts of the Fire tablet versions, and ensure that everything works very smoothly. So that's it, I would say, for your usual web apps. But I've got a few tips here for if you're creating game applications, so game web apps. So the first thing would be to use requested animation frame to cap the frame rate, and don't render at more than a required rate. Next would be use data structures to keep track of game state. Use efficient collision detection algorithms and data structures such as the KD tree, or use an efficient pre-existing library. Don't constant calculate the game states dynamically, and don't try and draw things that are not visible. And finally, don't use CSS shadows, as they are expensive to paint and can significantly degrade performance. So we talked about the hosted and packaged apps. So I want to talk about the HTML5 hybrid apps, which is probably what you're most used to as web developers. So the HTML5 hybrid apps are platform native apps that can present the web content as part of the client application. See, what's really nice about this is it gives you the flexibility of your native app while still including parts of a web application. So developing your app as a hybrid app allows you to provide capabilities that are not possible in a web app due to that security boundary between the browser and the device APIs. And one way you can do this is using WebView. So this is the standard Android WebView class, and this comes out of the box with Android. So the WebView provides the following benefits. So it allows you for support for the latest web standards, so HTML5, CSS, JavaScript. It allows for hardware acceleration and GPU optimizations for CSS. And it allows support for web developer tools on devices for debugging and profiling. However, we also have what we call Amazon WebView. So in FireOS 5 and later releases, Amazon WebView is a transparent replacement for the standard Android WebView class. It is supported on Fire TV and third generation and later Fire tablets. So the Amazon WebView uses a custom build of Chromium that has been hardware optimized and GPU accelerated specifically for FireOS devices. And Amazon WebView provides the following advantages. So better video performance on TV devices, so fluidity, memory, audio and video sync. It also is faster and more efficient at rendering, and it has improved script performance and memory management. And finally, it allows for page rendering, layout optimization, and painting improvements. So you can choose which one you want to use. However, obviously, we recommend that you use Amazon WebView if you were trying to build a hybrid application. And I think hybrid applications are definitely what we see more so these days, especially with when using frameworks. If you're using if you're building an Android application, or you're building a React Native application, in fact, so React Native application that would work both on your iOS devices or your Android devices, then you see more React Native applications being used. And the fact that Fire Tablet runs on Fire OS, you can also use these React Native framework applications and use things like the WebView class within that to make sure that your application runs smoothly. So there's lots of ways that you can use these hybrid applications and allow for your optimization for hybrid applications for your Fire tablets. So finally, I want to talk about testing. So obviously, a most important part about building an application is also making sure that you test it. And we have a great way for you to be able to test your web applications, and that is using the Amazon Web App Tester. So the Web App Tester is available for download from the Amazon App Store. And you can install the Web App Tester from the Amazon App Store on your tablet, or you can get it from the Amazon website. So once you've got the Amazon Web App Tester on your device, and I'll actually attempt a live demo of this at the end of going through all these steps, the first thing I want to talk about is the hosted apps. So if you want to load a hosted app into the Amazon Web Tester, you can do so in one of two ways. So the first thing to do would be to type in a URL that points to your application. Ensure that you are in the hosted web apps tab, and then you type in your URL into the text box that's right at the top near the page. So this is what the screen will look like. So as you can see, quite intuitive. You just need to type in your URL. The second way for hosted web apps is to upload a JSON file containing one or more of the URLs. So you can use this using a text editor on your computer, and all you have to do is create a file called Amazon Test URLs JSON. This file will look something like this, and what you have to do is enter the URL of your web apps as shown in this template. So it's just a simple JSON file. You add your URLs, and then on your computer, you can navigate to the location where you saved this JSON and copy the file onto the host device, so your Fire tablet in this case. When using a GUI file transfer tool on either a Mac or Windows computer, this file should go directly into the root directory. And if you're using ADB to transfer, put the Amazon test URL JSON file into the SD card directory. So we have quite detailed documentation on how to, transfer files through ADB and how to get set up with ADB again on our developer console. So if this isn't clear, make sure you go back there and check out how to do this. So once you've done this, you'll be able to see those URLs within the web app tester, and I'll show you this in a second. So again, for the packaged apps, there's also two ways that you can load in your URLs on your host device. Again, the first way would be to just type it in, but make sure you type in a URL that points to the zip file containing your app. Ensure you're on the packaged apps tab as well, and type in the URL of the .zip file in the text box near the top of the page. So this will ensure that we point to the right location within our packaged app. The second way is to upload your zip file to the SD card on your directory on the Fire tablet host device. So on your computer, navigate to the location where you saved the .zip file and copy the file to the host device. Again, when using a GUI file transfer tool on Mac or Windows, the zip file should go on the Amazon Web Apps directory. And if you're using ADB, put the zip card into the SD card / Amazon Web Apps directory. So slightly different to the hosted apps, this goes into a subfolder. And when checking the contents of the host device file system using ADB, the zip file should reside in that subfolder. On your host device, if the app tester is open and the .zip file is not recognized, you can press the sync list button to refresh the list. So last but not least, we've talked about testing, we've talked about launching, and now finally I want to talk about debugging. So like with your usual web apps, you can actually use Chrome DevTools on your development machine to debug a web app that is running on a Fire tablet device or any other Android device for that matter. So to do this, you need to connect to the development machine and host device using either a USB cable or a Wi-Fi network. And I'm going to show you this as well, or I'm going to attempt to show you this because I've got my Fire tablet connected right here. So I'll show you what the web tester app looks like and how we can use debugging. So to use debugging, again, it's not that difficult. There's a few steps you have to follow. So first thing is to install Chrome DevTools. Then you need to set up your dev environment using USB or Wi-Fi. You need to upload your file, make sure that's uploaded, and then on your development machine, enter Chrome // inspect in the URL input line. And you should be able to see what your application would look like as a web app. And this, once you've done all of this, you just need to click this tick here, and it should load within your Chrome DevTools. And a little example of what this looks like is here. So this is what you should be seeing when you've uploaded this properly on the web app tester and using the Chrome DevTools to debug. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to attempt this demo, and hopefully all goes to plan. I'm praying to the demo gods as always. But please, if you have any questions in the meantime, drop them in the chat. I want to obviously have this as an interactive session, so I'm here to answer all your questions as usual. even if they aren't related to this, drop them in the chat and I'll get to them at the end. So give me 1 second. Let me now get my Fire tablet connected to this. So here we go. In the meantime, again, yes, please ask questions in the chat. And I should have my Fire tablet connected now. I've been very brave here, trying to attempt a demo on my first solo stream. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my Fire tablet. So this is the web app tester. So as you can see, it's the same UI that we saw within the slides. So if you want to test your hosted app, that's what we will be able to test today, because I'm going to put in just the normal URL for Amazon. But I'll go through a little bit of what is available for you. So you can choose to access developer help menu. You can test your packaged application. So this is the tab for your packaged application. You can add a device, and once you've done that, you can add your application. So in this case, what I did was I just added the Amazon URL as my test URL. And as you can see, there's that little tick button there that lets me access the developer tools within my computer. So you can also choose between other things, that you can clear your app cache, you can clear your history, you can clear your cookies, amongst other things. So I'm going to click test, and now within my browser, I should be able to access the Chrome DevTools to see and inspect the Amazon website. So now I'm going to share my Chrome DevTools, and if I head over to what it was in the slides, so we said it was https://inspect. I'm going to pause here for a second to answer some questions. So we've got a question here. 1 second. So can I point the user to download another app from the App Store? Maybe using a combination of user agent and deep link for the Amazon App Store. Is this supported? So yes, essentially, if you want to point the user to download another app from the Amazon App Store, starting from a web app, you can use the user agent to identify you are on an Amazon device, and then use a deep link towards the desired app. And I can share some links to some documentation for where you can find some more information about this. In the meantime, I am still trying to just pull up what I wanted to show you, which was the inspect part of the... There we go. Here we go. Sorry. Many things to show and share today. So let me share my screen. So I am going to share the window. So hopefully, there we go. So as you can see, this is connected to my device, my Fire device here. And I have options to use Chrome DevTools as I would with a normal web application. So this is really useful. So you can see how your web application running on your tablet would look, and you can inspect the elements here. So if I click inspect, hold on, that popped up with another screen, which I can now share as well. So that's the share screen that we would probably want to see as a developer. So here you go. So, I mean, obviously I can't really inspect much on the Amazon website, but as you can see, I can use the Chrome DevTools as I would on my desktop, as if I was inspecting just a normal website. So this is really powerful because you can inspect, you can change things like your device orientation. You've got all the cool things you can use with Chrome DevTools to ensure that your Android application is running as expected, both on your desktop and your tablet. So this is actually running on my tablet, but I can inspect it as if it were running, on my desktop, which is great. So again, all you really need to do for this is to make sure you are doing the debug steps, and then you can play around with all the different aspects of Chrome DevTools. If you implemented the forced device orientation, you can come in here, over here, so expand this. But if you've used Chrome DevTools, you'll know all the cool stuff you can do. So again, if you're debugging, definitely recommend using the web app tester and Chrome DevTools to debug. So that is it for me for today. I have spoken by myself for 45 minutes. So I'm going to pause and open up for more questions. Even if it's not on today's topic, again, drop them in the chat. I'm here to help. So I will pause here. I will stop sharing my screen as well. But I can pull up the demo in full. So let me organize my screen so you can see everything at one go. Here we go. This was what we were seeing. So this is the screen side by side. Here we go. There we go. So that's what you'd be able to see. So like this is what I clicked. So I clicked the inspect of the Amazon website. I could also click to inspect just the HTML page. Obviously, this isn't going to give me much, but it does tell me, many things about the application. So what loaded it, the resource files, as we can see, the CSS and JS files here. So lots of cool stuff to explore. So we do have another question. So the question is on including third-party advertising libraries. Interesting question. So for third-party advertising libraries, so as I'm aware, we don't limit the use of third-party advertising programs in web apps, but we do recommend you review the terms of using such third-party advertising prior to incorporating them within your web app. So as usual, make sure you're doing the right thing, making sure you're doing the right checks before you integrate anything within your web app. Any more questions? Again, we had a break from last week. So if you had any questions from last week's session, if you have any burning questions on any of our previous sessions from my YouTube videos, anything you want. I don't have Mario to talk to at this point of this session, so I'm just going to talk to myself. But again, I can bring in next week's topic. So again, next week we have a break for May Bank holiday. So we're trying to make sure that we give you guys our time and make sure that we are, covering the topics you want to hear. However, we know most people try and take an extended holiday during the bank holiday. So we decided to postpone our session on 8 a.m. to the future and take a break next week. So we will have more exciting topics for you when we're back, which we will share on our Twitter or on our LinkedIn, so you can see what we will be talking about when we're back. In the meantime, make sure you don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Everything's up there. We want to hear from you. Okay, so we've got another question here. This is actually a really good question. So related to split screen. So we had a whole session on split screen and making sure that we were making our Fire tablet apps productive. This is a great question. Can my web app support split screen on a Fire tablet? So I would say yes to the hybrid apps because those have a manifest file. So as you remember with split screen, we had to add some code within our manifest file to ensure that we could enable split screen. Again, this is only available on some Fire tablets, but if you're creating a hybrid application, put the code on split screen into your manifest and it should work. So great question. Thank you, Gio. Yes, we've got great questions, Gio. Definitely agree. So I'm going to give it another minute, but if we have no more questions, I am going to end this stream shortly. To again break next week. Hopefully Mario will be back with me next week to answer all your questions. And if not, again, make sure you tweet us. use the hashtag Amazon Fireside Chat. You can find more information on our developer console as usual. So head over to developer.amazon.com. You can also reach out to me personally if that helps. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere you want to drop your questions to me. I'll try and help in answering them. So if we don't have any more questions, it was a heavy topic. I know maybe there might not be a lot of developers, Fire Tablet developers, Android developers that are used to creating web apps for Fire tablets. However, this is something we're seeing more and more nowadays, is web people, like developers that want to create something once and use it everywhere. So hopefully you found these tips useful. If you do have a web app and you didn't know you could test and debug using some of our tools, hopefully you find that useful too. And if not, I think that's it for me for today. So have a really good evening, everybody. And I will catch you here, same time, same place, 6 o'clock GMT, 10 a.m. PST. Follow us on our socials to get updates on the topic we will be coming back with. And see you soon. Have a great May Bank holiday, everyone. Thanks. Bye.